First of all, welcome to this press briefing of the 12th session of the Conference of State Parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It is my pleasure to convene this briefing to you in my capacity as President-elect of the Conference of State Parties on behalf of my distinguished vice presidents and colleagues in the Bureau from Finland, Hungary, Liberia, and Singapore. Just a while ago, we opened the 12th session with the presence of the Secretary General, authorities and representatives of state parties and observers, UN systems of NGOs. Opening remarks were also delivered by the chairman, the vice chairman of the Committee of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Mr. Senator Monahan from Thailand, the Special Rapporteur for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Secretary's Special Envoy on Disability and Accessibility, and a representative of civil society, as well as Ecuador as president of the conference. Today's briefing will provide information on the session with a focus on its program of work. I would start by providing a brief overview of the background of the conference, as well as the key updates on the Bureau's ongoing preparations. As you may recall, the convention was adopted by the General Assembly through its Resolution 61-106 on the 13th of December of 2006. I had the honor to chair the working group that drafted the convention for 2002 to 2005, and these two extraordinary people who are accompanying me on this podium also were with me when we elaborated the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I might as well say it in public. The 13th of December is my birthday, so when the General Assembly approved this, I had a very nice gift. It came into force on the 3rd of May of 2008 upon the 20th ratification, which also corresponded to my country. Ecuador was the 20th ratifier of the convention. The conference was established as a mechanism and a calendar of UN meetings in accordance with the Convention Article 40. Since 2008, 11 sessions of the conference have been convened. The Conference of State Parties has been in a steady growing and has become one of the largest and most important global forums on disability issues. Last year, the conference successfully attracted more than 1,400 participants from 180 state parties and observers. Over 100 NGOs and dozens of UN entities also registered and participated in the COSP. It also attracted 6 million viewers who reached us digitally. This year, we expect an even higher number, along with close to 90 side events, back-to-back with the official program. This will surely make this conference a huge difference, allowing for a very rich and in-depth exchange and experiences, innovative ideas to make the rights and inclusion of persons with disabilities a reality on the ground. In all these courses, civil society community made a significant contribution to the success of the COSP sessions. And for that, as state parties and as Bureau, we want to extend our special appreciation, and we look forward to your continued cooperation in the coming session. The 12th Conference of State Parties will take place here at the United Nations headquarters starting today at 13th of June. The conference offers an opportunity for state parties and all stakeholders to reflect on experiences and lessons learned over the past year, identify gaps to strengthen policies, and improve our practices to fully implement the CRPD. As the international community is taking action to achieve the 2030 Agenda, our deliberations and contributions at the Conference of State Parties becomes more relevant and important. We must amplify our efforts to fully implement the Convention while pursuing sustainable development for our people in line with the SDGs. Taking into account all these new developments, the Bureau decided to choose the following overarching theme for the upcoming 12th session, namely, ensuring inclusion for persons with disabilities in a changing world through the implementation of the CRPD. This morning, after the opening statements, we proceeded to the next agenda item, which is the general debate. Based on previous experience, it envisages the general debate shall continue this afternoon and may likely extend in the following days to exhaust the list of speakers. This year, the conference includes 3 roundtables to discuss 3 thematic issues with cross-cutting theme. The first roundtable will take place tomorrow, Wednesday, 12 June at 10 to 1. The theme will be Technology, Digitalization, and ICTs in Empowering the Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities. This roundtable will be co-chaired by Finland, Vice President of the Bureau, and representative of civil society. The second roundtable will be in the afternoon, which will focus on social inclusion and the right to the highest attainable standard of health. This roundtable will be co-chaired by Hungary, Vice President of the Bureau, and a representative from civil society. The morning of the Thursday, 13th, we will be dedicated to the third roundtable on the theme Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities in Society through Participation in Cultural, Recreational, Leisure, and Sports. This roundtable will be co-chaired by Singapore, Vice President of the Bureau, and a representative of civil society. All three roundtables will also consider and discuss a cross-cutting theme of raising awareness. On Thursday afternoon, we will have an interactive dialogue with the UN system and other stakeholders. In this segment, we will have the opportunity to hear from key UN entities, civil society, and other stakeholders on their work and initiatives that are being undertaken to support member states for implementing the CRPD and advancing disability inclusive development and the thematic priority areas concerned by this session and more general in the context of the 2030 agenda. The interactive dialogue segment will be followed by a closing of the conference where we will have a number of high officials. I can assure you that the Bureau and the Secretariat have been hardworking to provide reasonable accommodation for all persons with disabilities in all planned activities. However, we must have prepared background notes and other documents that are available to you on the website page of COSP12UN.org Disabilities. We have to make an added effort to make more inclusive the General Assembly. Undoubtedly, we have a problem of accessibility in this building, in spite of the efforts done here in Geneva and Vienna and other UN edifices. We run into a problem of accessibility, and that limits our possibilities. 12 years later, I think it is about time that we get into the mode of making this and the buildings of the United Nations and agencies completely accessible for persons with disabilities, whatever the disability. This concludes my part of the briefing. The floor is open, and in any of you who have questions for me or for my accompanied colleagues, please, I am very open. Identify yourself.
Hi, thank you for the briefing. Iris Frade from Prensa Latina News Agency.
Prensa Latina.
I want to know more about the specific situation in Latin America and the Caribbean with all those issues that are you talking about. Thank you.
Well, I think that 177 countries have become members of have signed and ratified the convention, and we have other observer states. In the last 10 years, if I may make a brief summary, we have advanced in a number of fields. When we began this in 2006, 70 countries of the United Nations did not have internal legislation on disability. Now I believe that there are only a handful. The reality is that the perception internationally is that disability is a thematic issue. It is an important thematic issue. I just stated in the General Assembly that, in my personal belief, I think that you're either born with a disability or you acquire it during your life by accident, by sickness, by war, or by whatever other conditionality. But when we age, we will be disabled. Our parents were disabled, and we will have some type of disability. So if you tabulate 1 billion people, according to the World Bank and the World Health Organization, that are disabled, and you tabulate another 1 billion people who are aging, you have an encompassing group of 2 billion people who have fathers, mothers, husbands, wives, or whatever other relationship. I very broadly think that more than 4 billion people have an interrelationship with this subject matter, and that we have to make a change in our chip. Society has to change this from thinking that the disability is a minority issue and that it is about them to a fundamental change in that this is about all of us. That what we are doing in making accessible the halls or bathrooms or whatever, or making accessible ITCs, or fighting for the rights of persons with disabilities is a fight for all of us. So I think the world will change in a paradigm shift when they encompass the diversity as a holistic society more than an exclusive and excluding society. I will leave my colleagues if they want to make a comment.
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. And I think that all around the world, including in Latin America, the convention has posed significant challenges because the convention brings a lot of innovations in the recognition of the rights of persons with disabilities, which, of course, were not enjoying the rights and continue not to enjoy the rights because of stigma, because of discrimination, and because of barriers. I think that the conference, as the ambassador mentioned, is a great opportunity to bring together different partners working at national level and international level to discuss and to share about how to advance and how to identify policy responses to solve the challenges that persons with disabilities are facing. One of the big, I think, important elements that was raised this morning during the opening is precisely that the United Nations in this house needs to make profound transformations to the way in which they are working through all their pillars. And the Secretary General announced the launch of a UN Disability Inclusion Strategy, which for me is fundamental because it's requiring this organization to be held accountable on how they're doing and including persons with disabilities, but also I think it's important that it will provide the support at national level so that the states in Latin America can also count on the UN system to advance the rights of persons with disabilities. So UNICEF, UNDP, and all the different funds and agencies working at country level will have to support programmatically the implementation of the convention. And I think that is a fundamental change and something that is strongly needed. And that's something that states will welcome because there is an impetus and interest from political parties of the convention to be part and to advance in the recognition of the rights of persons with disabilities.
Let me turn this on for you. Okay.
Thank you. Well, I'm speaking on behalf of the chairperson of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, who could not be here due to circumstance beyond his control. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the United Nations, especially the Bureau and our dear Ambassador Gallegos, who was with us since the beginning, the inception of the convention. I remember him quite well, and we always ran into each other, and we know that we have been along with the progress. Almost 20 years ago, there was no reference to persons with disabilities at all in the UN mainstream development agenda, such as Millennium Development Goal, no reference whatsoever. It is because of this convention that brings disability inclusion into other aspects, other parts of the United Nations and global initiatives and legal frameworks and so on and so forth. A very monumental living example is the SDGs, as it contains many targets and indicators which are disability inclusive and have specific reference to persons with disabilities. So this is a very good opportunity to see that disability inclusion is well recognized. But this present Secretary General is thinking beyond the policy document that is going to be followed by the member states. There's a growing call for UN system itself to be more accessible to and inclusive of persons with disabilities, and that's why he launched this disability inclusion strategy, which is well appreciated by all of us. Having said that, I have to say, being the only one here out of three who are not from Latin America, I must say that enthusiasm to the convention, enthusiasm has been recognized by all of us, that the Latin American friends and colleagues have been so enthusiastic about putting forward the agenda of disability rights, from the core fundamental human rights perspectives. It has been recognized all over the world. We in Asia are probably more focused on social, economic development because the nature of how development has been perceived in our region. But when it comes to pure fundamental human rights, especially civil political rights. I think you can see so much dynamic involvement and enthusiasm from Latin America. And I'd like to give a credit to a legal reform recently witnessed from Latin American country like Peru, which conducted its own legal reform to recognize the legal capacity of persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others. And I believe this will be followed globally. People are, taking a very attentive look at that legal reform, and this is to give credit to two of you, Ambassador and our special rapporteur, that Latin America should be proud of yourself for having so much enthusiasm on this. Of course, we need to learn from each other, from different parts of the world. I'm from Asia Pacific, and I think we have a lot to offer, especially when it comes to business and human rights and inclusive business or disability inclusion in economic empowerment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question, please? Yes.
Hi, my name is Amy Lieberman with DevX. I was hoping you could all talk a bit more about this new strategy from the SG's office, and specifically what areas you think, in terms of programming or just the physical UN building itself, how all of these need to become more accessible and inclusive. And then also, a bit unrelated, I noticed that a lot of the sessions, or some of the sessions, focus on data and data inclusion. And if you could give me a sense of where work on that stands right now and some of the biggest issues you're looking at, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Well, we have the author of the report here with us, so I will leave her to answer that part of the question. The issue of data is extremely important for programming public policy. We have to acknowledge that we need to know what's happening on the ground, and we are working very diligently in a number of fronts to have or provide the capacity of countries to have that data. Not only the accountability of how many persons with disabilities, but everything that has to deal with the whole integral part of life. There are initiatives of both national accountability, accounting on the issue of disability, health, education, integration, inclusion, and so on. We have to make an added effort on this because the numbers are staggering. The numbers we have of disability, of course, are broad-lined. There is a 10-year report on disability, the one I mentioned, out of about 1 billion people. I think they're much more. It depends on how you tabulate this issue. What we're trying to do now is elevate the capacity from the numeric quantitative issue to the qualitative issue, which is, okay, how do we have the numbers, how do we change our legislations and how do we change our societies? Because in the long run, what we are trying to do in the Convention on Disability or any other UN Human Rights Convention is change our societies, change the way our societies perceive disability, perceive a person with a disability, integrate them into the whole realm of society, and how these societies have to be more holistic. Appreciate the difference more than the sequence of segregating and discrimination or ignoring them, as has been the historical trait. So numbers are important, but we also have to make a qualitative vision of how we use those numbers. Catalina. Catalina Devandas is the Special Rapporteur for Disability. I think she forgot to mention that when she intervened.
Yes, apologies for that. Thank you for the question on the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy. This is the result of actually a concerted effort to, first of all, acknowledge, and I think that the Secretary General was very clear about that today, but indeed, as the Ambassador said last year, I conducted a baseline report on, it was an assessment, an institutional assessment of how the UN is actually responding to the needs of persons with disabilities, both in terms of physical accessibility and internal administrative issues, and in terms of programming, how the UN is delivering and supporting in the ground the inclusion of persons with disabilities. And in both areas and across all the pillars of work of the organization, and it was also mentioned today, I think that the picture is not a pretty one. The UN is still not a fully inclusive organization when it comes to accessibility of premises, when it comes to recruitment of staff with disabilities, when it comes to procurement, when it comes to organizing conference and services, but also it is not, it doesn't have the capacity to deliver on the ground. So the main findings of the report were that there is lack of mainstreaming of the rights of persons with disabilities through all the organization. There is a lack of capacity and understanding the new paradigm that the ambassador was explaining. And there was, because I have to say that it seems that the Secretary General has indeed taken this on board in his own personal priorities. There was a lack of leadership, high-level leadership in all of the entities. So as a result, this strategy is actually an accountability framework with concrete goals and benchmarks for the whole system in different domains, including accessibility, procurement, recruitment, but also programming, to have the UN delivering and reporting. And I think what is very important is that the idea is that the Secretary General will report periodically to member states to inform about progress. I believe if this become a priority, a legitimate and real priority of the administration and of the states, we are going to start seeing the change that is needed. And I think, as the ambassador stressed at the beginning, it's long overdue. It's been 12 years since the convention was adopted, and we cannot continue to deal with a GA hall that is not accessible for wheelchair users. We cannot continue to not be able to enter into bathrooms and not seeing persons with disabilities working in this organization. So there is a lot to do, and we are not happy about that, but I think that what I am very optimistic about it is that we now have a framework of action. Thank you.
Just to make a few additional comments, I think what both of them, both Ambassador and Special Rapporteur, just referred to, a very key point is procurement. We could have a very good strategy framework, we could have good policy, we could have good mandate. When it comes to purchasing policy, especially through procurement, if it lacks a strong mandate for accessibility and inclusion, we're not going anywhere. I see a lot of initiatives in several countries, very good words, but fail to deliver the good result because of a failure to address it in the procurement processes. And I think this strategy will catch this very important issue, and through more attention, greater attention to utilizing a procurement policy, we will be able to achieve more or less a greater level of disability inclusion in the near future, hopefully. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Shauna McGee from Kyoto News, and on behalf, I'm sorry I'm doing this a little bit late, but on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association, we really appreciate this briefing. I have two questions, if I may. Could any of the three of you walk us through what the biggest challenges you see to implementing the convention at this point? And then secondly, as everybody's aware, Tokyo is hosting the Olympics and the Paralympics next year. What value do you see such sporting events have in changing perceptions of the disabled? And what role could Japan have, any leading role as a host of the Paralympics next year? Thank you.
I think that in my vision, of course, the issue of implementing the convention is multidimensional. It touches on every issue of livelihood that we have, and of course it has an outstanding capability of referring to how a person conducts his life. You need education to have a good job. You need health. You need to be integrated into society. You need an adaptable working space in order to carry out your work and have a decent wage. you need to have autonomy of life, capacity of democratically electing and being elected, and so on. So the implementation of the convention is multidimensional. It's not only one of the issues, but I will leave my colleagues who are more experts on this than I am. I have to confess that I am not an expert on disability. I'm a diplomat. What I try to do is negotiate and put together the wills of 193 countries to try to advance the cause of disability. I am a firm believer of sports and the importance that this has not only in recreational issues and the joining of this. I am a board member of Special Olympics, which is an organization that fosters intellectual disability, games, inclusive medicine and education. Now, the Paralympics are extremely important. I think Tokyo and Japan are doing an extraordinary job in the issue of preparing for this massive event. I think they have done a very important aspect of accessibility. We are always counting on Paralympics to elevate the challenges people with disabilities meet and are able to play. I can also say that I want to divert from what you just asked, because Ecuador has outside in the entrance to the globe, when you enter near where they have the disarmament figures, you have a playground. We have brought an accessible, inclusive playground into the United Nations to provide other countries with the semblance of saying that this is the way we should go to make all inclusive playgrounds for all children. If children begin to play, it doesn't matter if they are disabled or not. So as an effort from the Ecuadorian side, we have put that in the UN, and I would advise you guys to walk through it. It's very simple, but it carries a profound message that integration and inclusion means an integration and social inclusion of everyone, beginning from children. Catalina?
Yes, thank you. I think that to implement the convention, we really need to change, and the first element is the change in the view about persons with disabilities and what I call the embracing diversity. Unless we don't recognize the full citizenship and existence of persons with disabilities, and until we don't appreciate that having a disability is a normal part of human diversity, we are not going to have the right responses. Once we work on that part, understanding the full citizenship of persons with disabilities, the rest will come. And then, as the ambassador said, that there are multiple interventions that should be done, starting, I think, with the provision of basic social protection for all persons with disabilities, providing them with the support that they need to be able to participate on an equal basis with others. And together with that, I think that the element that was raised, and I also leave it to a member of the CRP committee, but the biggest element of recognizing that full citizenship of persons with disabilities is precisely participation. For me, if you want to have a concrete, very specific responses, participation, and more participation of persons with disabilities, direct participation in policy making, direct participation in every single aspect of life. That's going to transform the way in which societies are looking at persons with disabilities, and that means participation in the school and the playground. That means participation in the work environment. That means participation and and the political life of a country. It means participation in every single aspect, and that's going to make the difference, because if persons with disabilities are present, we will stop the exclusion and the marginalization that we face, and end the practices that so far violate our rights.
I will be brief. I'd like to encourage you to look at the committees, the CRPD committee's latest general comment, number 7, which focuses on participation of persons with disabilities in the implementation and monitoring of the convention. So this is one of the most important issue, reflecting our focus that we need to really increase the level of full and effective participation. In terms of political and public life, coming from a political arena myself as member of the Senate in my country, I think, this participation in political and public life really reflects the ability to be in the center of power to make decisions and power to control how the society is directed to. So I through participation directly by persons with disabilities and through their representative organizations, this is a very challenging issue. We see most persons with disabilities, especially in developing countries, are not able to have their voice heard, and their voice are not taken seriously because they remain scattered and they are not able to take collective action as organizations, representative organizations. So that's why the CRPD committee gives a lot of effort to promote the persons with disabilities to come together, form and strengthen the organizations so that their voice could be heard and they can mobilize their effort to make policy changes. With regards to next year Olympic and Paralympic in Tokyo, I believe Japan has been leading a very positive role when it comes to physical accessibility. If you go to Tokyo, a lot of initiatives have been taken, and even for many decades, Japan have done so quite a bit. What remains to be seen is the true substance of participation of persons with disabilities in conducting activities themselves, especially when it comes to access to sport, cultural, leisure, and recreational activities. Japan is still await ratification of the Marrakesh Treaty, and I hope they will do so before the Olympic next year. And this is another symbolic progress towards their recognition of disability inclusion. And when it comes to technology as well, Japan is a leading country in digital development, and I hope that it will focus more on the digital inclusion, digital accessibility for all, especially many persons with disabilities from around the world will participate in these sporting events. And we do hope that much will be given to accessibility of all aspects in order to promote their involvement and their full participation in this coming sport events. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Think not. I don't see anyone adventurously asking anything else. So thank you very much, most kind. And we leave you with the thought that this is an important meeting for billions of people who belong to this, who have a caretaker role here and that are interested. We hope that the internet will permit us to, if 6 million people saw this last year, we hope to break that record this year. We'll tell you how many we think we tabulate on this meeting. Thank you very much.